Stupid animal. You ain't worth nothing to me no more. This is where you're gonna stay and die.
A heartless merchant abandoned his blind donkey right in the middle of the desert. That poor creature had worked for him for 20 long years. But now that he couldn't see, he was tossed out like yesterday's garbage. But here's the thing that greedy man didn't know. That old donkey was holding on to a secret that would change a poor young man's life forever. This is the story of a blind donkey left to die in the desert, and the orphan boy who found him barely breathing. He showed that animal some kindness, and it turned out to be the biggest blessing of his entire life. A long time ago, in a land where the sun beat down without mercy, and the sand dunes stretched out as far as the eye could see, there lived a young orphan named Thomas. His folks had passed away when he was just a little kid, taken by a sickness that swept through their tiny village and left nothing but heartbreak behind. From that day on, Thomas learned to make it on his own, with his own 2 hands, all cracked and rough from hard work, and a heart full of faith in the good Lord above. Thomas lived in a little shack thrown together with old wooden boards and a roof made of straw, sitting on the outskirts of town where the wind kicked up dust and carried forgotten memories. The walls let the cold in at night and the burning heat in during the day. It wasn't much, not by a long shot, but for Thomas, it was home. It was his safe place, the only spot in this world he could call his own. And right there, in the middle of having next to nothing and being all alone, he had found peace. The kind of peace that only folks who VV learn to be thankful even when they got nothing can truly understand. Every single morning, before the sun had fully woken up, Thomas would head out into the desert to gather dry wood and healing herbs that he'd sell at the town market. His hands, all rough and covered with calluses, told the story of years of working without a single break. His clothes had been patched up so many times, they barely held their shape anymore, and they sure didn't do much to protect him from the heat or the cold. But even though he was dirt poor, Thomas walked with his head held high, never bitter or angry at a world that had given him so little. The folks in town would watch him pass by with a mix of pity and respect. They'd whisper to each other when they saw him carrying his humble goods. "That boy Thomas," they'd say. "He ain't got no family and he ain't got no money, but his heart is purer than most folks who got everything." And it was the truth. Thomas would help anyone he could, share his little bit of bread with people who had even less, and he never held a grudge against those who treated him bad. His soul was clean like water from a fresh spring, and his faith in God stood strong like the mountains surrounding that land. But while some folks saw Thomas as an example of goodness, there were others who looked at him like he was dirt under their shoes. One of those people was Don Aurelio, a rich and powerful merchant whose name was known in every market across the region. Don Aurelio had built his fortune hauling precious goods across the desert. Gold, silver, fancy spices, and fine fabrics all passed through his hands, filling his coffers with more riches than most folks could even dream of. But his heart was as dry as the desert he crossed, unable to feel compassion or gratitude toward anyone. Don Aurelio lived in a big old mansion built with fine stones and imported wood. His stables housed the best horses and pack donkeys in the whole region. Strong animals, well fed, with shiny coats that showed how well they were taken care of. But in the darkest corner of those stables, where the light barely dared to reach, there was a donkey different from all the rest. His name was Brownie. Brownie had been the best pack donkey Don Aurelio ever owned back in his younger days. For 20 whole years, that noble and strong animal had carried the most valuable goods across dangerous routes. He had crossed mountains, survived sandstorms, and walked under the unforgiving sun without ever complaining. Brownie had been a key part of how Don Aurelio got so rich. But time don't spare nobody, and all those years of back-breaking work had taken their toll. A white film now covered Brownie's eyes. He was completely blind. His legs weren't fast no more. His back couldn't handle heavy loads, and so he had been pushed aside, forgotten like an old tool nobody needed. Nobody fed him proper. Nobody talked to him nice. Nobody brushed his coat. Only the silence and the smell of old hay kept him company in that dark corner where he waited for death to come. One day, Don Aurelio walked into the stable with heavy steps and cold eyes. He stopped in front of Brownie and stared at him with disgust. "Look at you," he said with poison dripping from his words. "Old, skinny, blind, you ain't good for nothing no more. You're just eating food that could feed animals that are actually useful." Brownie stayed still, his head hanging low, like he understood every cruel word coming out of his master's mouth. Don Aurelio called over one of his workers and gave him a cold order. Take this useless donkey out to the desert and leave him there. Let the sun, the hunger, or the wild animals deal with him. I don't want to see him in my stables no more. The worker hesitated for a second, but he knew that going against Don Aurelio meant losing his job. With a heavy heart, he tied a rope around Brownie's neck and led him out of the stable. The journey to the desert was long and painful. Brownie kept stumbling because he couldn't see the rocks or the uneven ground. The worker pulled him along without any mercy, rushing to get this terrible task over with. When they reached a far-off spot where there was nothing but sand and rocks, the man tied the donkey to a dry, twisted tree. "This is where you'll stay," he muttered without looking him in the eyes. "Your master don't want you no more." And without another word, he turned around and disappeared over the horizon. Brownie was left alone, abandoned under the brutal sun. His throat burned with thirst. His body shook from exhaustion. He couldn't see a thing, but his ears picked up the flapping of vulture wings starting to circle high up in the sky, patiently waiting for death to arrive. The poor animal didn't understand why. After 20 years of faithful service, he had been thrown away like some worthless piece of junk. But there he was, tied up and dying, with nobody to comfort him. Meanwhile, back in town, Thomas was getting ready for his daily work. That morning he felt something strange in his heart, a restlessness he couldn't explain. He decided to take a different path than usual, going deeper into the desert. He didn't know why he was doing it, but something inside was pushing him in that direction. The sun was already high when Thomas heard a weak sound. It was a faint bray, almost a whisper of life fighting not to fade away. He followed the sound with his heart pounding hard in his chest. And then he saw him, an old donkey skinny as a rail, eyes covered with a white film, tied to a dead tree in the middle of nowhere. "Lord have mercy, buddy," Thomas whispered as he approached slowly. "Who did this to you?" Brownie lifted his head when he heard that soft and caring voice. It was different from all the voices he had heard in recent years. There was no cruelty or contempt in it, just genuine concern. Thomas pulled out his canteen and poured fresh water into his hands, bringing them close to the donkey's mouth. "Drink a little, friend. Don't be scared. You ain't alone no more." Brownie drank eagerly, feeling life slowly returning to his worn-out body. When he finished, Thomas gently stroked his neck. "I don't know who left you out here, but they must have a real dark heart. I ain't gonna let you die." Carefully, Thomas untied the rope and started guiding the blind donkey toward his humble shack. The journey was slow and hard. Brownie kept stumbling, but Thomas held him steady with endless patience. "Easy now, buddy," he would say softly. "I'll be your eyes. Trust me." When they got to town, people started whispering. Some rich folks openly made fun of them. "Look at the orphan," they said, laughing. "Now he's picking up garbage from the desert. What's he gonna do with that old blind donkey? Probably sell him for meat." But Thomas didn't listen to the mockery. He just kept walking, guiding Brownie toward his home. The following days were filled with care and dedication. Thomas spent his small savings on medicine and food for the donkey. He bathed him with warm water, treated his wounds, talked to him sweetly. Little by little, Brownie started getting his strength back. His coat began to shine again. His body gained weight. And even though he was still blind, there was something different about him. A new kind of joy he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while Don Aurelio was riding through the outskirts of town, he saw Thomas brushing Brownie in front of his shack. He stopped his horse and let out a cruel laugh. Well, well," he said with sarcasm. "So you're the one who rescued my useless donkey. What a waste of time. That animal ain't good for nothing except eating food." Thomas looked up and answered calmly. "Maybe he's useless to you, Don Aurelio. But to me, he's a companion. And God don't create nothing without a purpose." Don Aurelio frowned, annoyed by the response. "Enjoy it while it lasts, orphan. Soon that donkey will die, and you'll be all alone, like you've always been." And spurring his horse, he rode off, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Several weeks went by. Thomas and Brownie developed a deep bond. The donkey, though blind, seemed to sense everything with extraordinary awareness. He recognized Thomas's footsteps, felt his emotions, anticipated his movements. It was like he could see with his heart what his eyes could no longer show him. One morning, Brownie started acting strange. He was restless, braying insistently and pulling toward a specific direction in the desert. Thomas watched him, curious. "What's going on, buddy? What are you trying to tell me?" Brownie kept pulling with determination, like he wanted to lead him somewhere. Thomas decided to trust his companion. He grabbed some water, a bit of food, and started walking alongside the blind donkey who was guiding him with sure steps. It was incredible. Brownie wasn't stumbling, wasn't hesitating. He walked like he knew every rock, every dune, every curve of the path. Thomas didn't understand how it was possible, but he felt something divine was happening. They walked for hours under the brutal sun. When the sunset started painting the sky orange, they reached a peculiar rock formation. In the center there was a big stone shaped like an eagle's head. Brownie stopped right there and started digging with his hooves. Thomas watched in amazement. "What's here, buddy?" He began digging with his hands, moving sand and stones, and then his fingers touched something hard. With his heart beating like crazy, he kept digging until he uncovered 2 old sacks, worn by time but still intact. When he opened the first one, the shine of gold lit up his face. Ancient coins, jewelry, precious stones, a fortune beyond anything Thomas could have ever imagined in his life. He fell to his knees, tears rolling down his cheeks. "My God," he whispered. "What kind of blessing is this?" What Thomas didn't know was that many years ago, when Brownie was young and strong, he had gotten lost during a caravan trip. While wandering alone, he had found the abandoned camp of some thieves who had buried their loot and never came back for it. Brownie had memorized the spot, keeping that secret for decades. A secret Don Aurelio never discovered because he never bothered to pay attention to his faithful donkey. Thomas returned to town a changed man. With that fortune, he bought land, built a proper house, and started helping those in need. But he never forgot Brownie. He built him a comfortable stable, gave him the best food, and treated him like the most valuable friend he ever had. News of the treasure reached Don Aurelio's ears. When he found out that the donkey he had left to die knew where a hidden fortune was buried, rage consumed him. He rode furiously to Thomas's house. "That donkey is mine," he shouted. "I raised him for 20 years. That treasure belongs to me." Thomas looked at him with calm. "You abandoned him to die, Don Aurelio. You threw him away like garbage. I saved him. I took care of him. I loved him. God decided who this blessing was meant for." Don Aurelio threatened to take him to court, but when the judge heard the story, he ruled in favor of Thomas. The donkey had been voluntarily abandoned, and therefore, everything that came from him belonged to the one who had rescued him. But fate had more in store for Don Aurelio. Consumed by envy and rage, he started making reckless decisions. He gambled big amounts of money trying to recover what he thought was rightfully his, but he lost every single bet. His businesses failed. His partners abandoned him, and little by little, his fortune slipped away like water through his fingers. A year later, Don Aurelio wandered through the streets of town as a beggar. His fine clothes had been replaced by rags, his mansion had been sold to pay debts, and nobody wanted to help him because they remembered how cruel he used to be. One day, hungry and desperate, he showed up at Thomas's door asking for charity. Thomas recognized him right away. He could have thrown him out, could have mocked him like Don Aurelio had done so many times, but his noble heart didn't know revenge. In silence, he offered him food, water, and a place to rest. Don Aurelio, tears in his eyes, fell to his knees. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I treated you worse than an animal. I made fun of you. I looked down on you. And still, you're helping me." Thomas put a hand on his shoulder. "God taught me to forgive, Don Aurelio, and he also taught me that sometimes the biggest blessings come disguised as curses. You gave me a blind donkey thinking you were giving me trash, but you gave me a treasure." Brownie, who was nearby, let out a soft bray, like he understood every word, like he knew his purpose in life had finally been fulfilled. Don Aurelio looked at him with new eyes, seeing for the first time not a useless animal, but a noble creature who deserved respect and gratitude. Years went by. Thomas became one of the most respected men in the region, not because of his wealth, but because of his generosity and kindness. He never forgot his humble beginnings, and he used his fortune to help orphans, like he had once been. He built schools, hospitals, and shelters for abandoned animals. Brownie lived out his final years, surrounded by love and care. When he finally left this world, Thomas buried him under a big tree he had planted just for him. There he placed a stone with a simple inscription. Here rests Brownie, a blind donkey who saw with his heart. He taught me that God don't abandon nobody, and that the greatest blessings sometimes come in the most unexpected forms. And so ended the story of the blind donkey and the poor orphan. A story the townspeople told from generation to generation, always remembering the same lesson. Don't judge by appearances, because what the world throws away, God can turn into a miracle. And never abandon those who can't serve you no more. Because life has a way of coming around, and kindness always finds its reward. Friends, if this story touched your heart, drop a comment telling me what lesson it taught you, and what country you're watching from. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget, there's more stories waiting for you, right on your screen. Thank you so much for sticking with me till the end.